Bernie Kerik, the former New York City Police Commissioner, died Thursday night after suffering a private illness, as it was described. Kash Patel wrote and actually reported the death of the former police and late police commissioner, who helped lead the country through 9/11, by the way. Rest easy, Commissioner. Your watch has ended, but your impact will never fade, as Kash Patel wrote in announcing Mr. Kerik's death. I had the pleasure of meeting and knowing Bernie Kerik. We had a number of conversations over the last 4 or 5 years. I found him to be a genuine person and someone I really liked. And our heartfelt sympathies go out to his family, and rest in peace, Bernie Kerik. I know no one will feel his loss more than perhaps Rudy Giuliani, who was mayor while Bernie Kerik served as police commissioner. Well, this is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Welcome to the show. We've got a big one for you today. We're going to talk about the one big, beautiful bill. Is it dead on arrival in the Senate, or will they find a way to make it across the finish line? We're also going to talk about the Epstein files. You may have seen Kash Patel and Dan Bongino on Mornings with Maria just declaring that Epstein did in fact commit suicide. It has set the internet on fire. It's put people into a frenzy because, frankly, folks, people just aren't buying it. And one of those people is Roger Stone. Roger will join us shortly and talk about the Epstein files. We're also going to talk about who killed JFK. We have a great excerpt from a fellow YouTuber, Julian Dory. I really like this kid. He's a good interviewer, and I don't know, there's just something about him that is very likable. He has on his show, and we've clipped a section of it, Gianni Russo. You may remember Gianni Russo if you're a little bit older, because he played Carlo Rizzi in the famous 1970s movie, The Godfather. So we're going to go back in, and I think that Gianni Russo, I think you really want to watch the segment of this interview. I think he succinctly explains who killed Kennedy and in part why in this interview that we're going to play for you. So we also have on Jay Beeber. He is with the National Motorist Society, and he's here to tell us that owning a car may be a fleeting privilege in America. Then we're going to have on Rich McCormick and John McGuire. Rich McCormick, congressman from Georgia, and John McGuire from Virginia. And they're going to talk to us about that big, beautiful bill. And so stay tuned. I think we've got a really good show for you, and I look forward to bringing it to you.
The Tuesday before,
okay,
I was with Costello. And there were some things going on. He said, you got to leave the country. He gave him a manila envelope. There was like $15,000. He said, go get some clothes. You're going to leave on the Independence. Friday, November 22nd. I said, why? He said, you don't ask me that. Just go. Get off the ship in Barcelona. It's in the book. Get off the ship in Barcelona when you get there. And I wish I knew that I wasn't getting back on, because all the clothes I bought and everything's in my room. I left.
Why did he do you know why he wanted you to leave the country?
Because he knew, and unbeknownst to me, all the wiretaps, everything they had on it, the kid was the messenger, so they wanted to get me. I was gone for 22 months. Nobody knew where I was.
Wait. I totally misunderstood that. Who wanted to get you?
What happened was, like getting him into the White House, 3 years later, I'm making the same trips now, bringing back a message. 5 different people I flew, and a lot of times they wouldn't tell me or say something. It was a note or something. I'd take it, and then he'd burn it. But when they had to tell me, they'd go like this. That means I could come close. And they whispered my ear what they were going to say. 5 major bosses told me, it's on. That's it. I'm flying all over the country. It's on. So when I see Costello that morning, Tuesday morning, he says, what's the message? I said, let me tell you something. I said, I did a lot of crazy things for you. Couldn't they just said to you, but he said, what? I said, and I was going to tell him, he said, no. Because they knew, or he knew.
But you didn't know.
I didn't know, but it's on. They all had a vote. They're going to kill him in Dallas. Lyndon B. Johnson arranged to bring him there. Inflation
Was announced on Friday to be down to 2.1%. And, you know, I may be the only person on the web and television and radio who says anything nice about Jerome Powell. I think he gets a really bad bum deal because, like it or not, he has led us through this period of high inflation. It soared as high as 9%. I remember the 70s very vividly after Carter had been president and Gerald Ford came out with little lapel pins that said, win, whip inflation now. And it was persistent. It went on for month after month after month, and it just appeared to be untamable. Under Jimmy Carter, interest rates got as high as 21% in an attempt to whip inflation. He was unsuccessful in doing so. Gerald Ford came in behind him, and they did eventually get inflation under control, but it took a lot of work and a lot of patience. So what will happen next? You know, Powell and the Fed are walking a high wire act, because if they don't put the lid on inflation, it will resurface and has the potential of skyrocketing out of control. If they put a lid on inflation, it has the potential of sending our nation's economy into a tailspin and putting us into a steep recession. And we are seeing hints of a slowdown. For one thing, the GDP has slowed to 2.1% growth. We are getting some weakness reported in corporate earnings, and unemployment remains high. So I think it is time now for the Fed to do what President Trump has urged. I think they will, in June, deliver us a rate increase. I think 25 basis points is probably what they're going to do. You know, if Trump had his way, they'd go to 0.5%. But I don't know. We'll just have to see what they decide to do. I think they get very high marks for managing this economic challenge and having done so without sending us back into an inflationary period and while not sending us into a recession. I don't know who and why anybody wouldn't celebrate that. Okay, folks, you all know that I'm a huge Tesla fanboy. I'm an Elon Musk fan. And June the 10th is the date. As I have learned, it is unconfirmed, but that is the date that Tesla is supposed to introduce the robo-taxi in Austin, Texas. Now, inherent in having the robo-taxi is going to be a fully autonomous car with no driver in the car, no driver assist, except there will be someone in a control center watching the car on a flat screen TV in case it gets confused or stymied somehow. This technology, I believe, as do many others, is going to revolutionize and change the way we live. I don't know that kids are going to need school buses anymore. I think it will be the end of carpools, and no one should be caught driving home encumbered And now an affordable robo-taxi almost assures that no one will. And elderly people who the kids want to take the car keys from will now be able to continue to use automobiles for transportation. They just won't be the one driving. The computer will. Now, as our listeners know, I have had a Tesla Model X now for 3 years in July. I absolutely love it. It is unquestionably a better mousetrap. It is quiet. It is smooth. It is fast. It has so much power. If I'm in traffic and I want to get around somebody and I can just step on it and it is just lightning fast. And as you've heard me say, possibly I can drive from my home in West Palm Beach to Miami without any interventions. I actually drove from my house to Boca Raton on Friday, and it was just a breeze. I mean, whenever I go down there, and I was meeting someone at Houston's restaurant, I always get confused. I can never find Houston's without a little bit of trial and error. The car does not suffer from that problem. It took me straight to Houston's, and remarkably, I stopped in front of a parking space. I turned on my blinker, and guess what happened? The car pulled in, and it left the identical amount of space between the car on my right and the car on my left. I mean, it's a force of nature. I've never seen anything like it. I really do believe it will revolutionize the way we live, and it will have profound impact on us as a society. Actually, as it already has shown. Today, the autonomous car is infinitely safer than a human driver. One accident in every 4.85 million miles driven versus an ICE vehicle, one in every 652,000 miles driven. Now, you've heard me say I'm an investor in Tesla. I don't give stock advice. You may want to do some research. You might want to look at it. It has gone up a lot in the last 45 days. I don't think we've seen anything yet when the robo-taxi is introduced in just a matter of 10 days. And in another 20 days after that, a month from now, I think we'll have a real strong verdict on the effectiveness of the autonomous car in a robo-taxi environment without a driver. So I'm really excited about it. Using the same learning technology, Tesla is developing the Optimus robot. It is a humanoid robot that will do repetitive, menial, and dangerous tasks. It's first going to be unveiled in the Tesla factory, helping to build cars. But in a year, it will be commercially available, and you can buy your own robot to help you do the dishes, mow the grass, and walk the dog. I can't wait. I am beside myself excited about having my own robot that can, for one thing, help me figure out where I left my glasses, help me find where I left my car keys. I can think of a lot of things that a robot will be able to do for me. Well, I don't know if the One Big Beautiful Bill is dead or not. I don't think it is, but we've got some clips here on it, and I want to play them for you now. Here is what Ron Johnson, Senator of Wisconsin, has to say about the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Does this bill get us closer to fixing it?
No, it exacerbates the problem.
How can that be?
Because we're not serious about returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic global spending. We've picked a number out of the air, 1.5 trillion. It's totally out of context. It's not really related to the moment. It's missing the moment.
Can I ask you, like, who came up with that number? Like, whose lie is that?
I think my best guess is conservatives in the House, who I love, didn't want to be blamed if this thing failed. So they said, well, listen, in order for us to accept a $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling, we've got to get at least $1.5 trillion in savings, spending cuts. I don't think they were looking at the big picture. I think they just pulled a big, I criticized them at the time privately. I said, listen, you set the bar way too low, you guys. This is completely inadequate. They set the bar way too low that it should have been easy to meet it, quite honestly. But even that was difficult because they didn't go through what I would consider the right kind of process. So maybe we can shift in terms of what we have to do, what I'm trying to accomplish here and my digging my heels in. Doge has kind of shown us what we can do here.
Well, Ron Johnson's not the only one that doesn't like it. For another person that doesn't like it is me. I mean, this irrational, irresponsible government spending has got to stop. Trump promised that he would, and he's not really delivering on that promise, and I'm disappointed as a result. But Rand Paul is another naysayer. Here's what Rand Paul had to say.
I support spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion. This year in September, when our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, well, that's Bidenomics, that's Biden spending levels. When March, every Republican, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a $2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction.
Put me in that column as well. I'm telling you, I've been an economics student of the economy for my entire adult life. I majored in economics in college. I am here to tell you that this level of spending is wrong and it is not sustainable. And the interest payments on the debt alone is going to break this country at some point. Elon Musk is not happy about it either. Here's what Musk had to say on his way out of the government as the founder of Doge.
And, it's not like I agree with everything the administration does. So it's like I agree with much of what the administration does, but we have differences of opinion. There are things that I don't entirely agree with. But it's difficult for me to bring that up in an interview because then it creates a bone of contention. So then I'm a little stuck in a bind where I'm like, well, I don't want to, speak out against the administration, but I don't want to. I also don't want to take responsibility for everything the administration is doing. So, I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along, everything he's done on Doge gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both. My personal opinion.
So you can see and hear the disappointment in Musk's voice. He spent 4 months trying to tame the federal government spending. He has gone through line item by line item and exposed fraud, waste, and abuse. His goal is to get to $1 trillion in savings. And now he's sort of throwing his hands up and say, and to what end? So you can come up with new ways to spend money and not impact the deficit? Well, I don't know. You could tell he was really, really straining to walk the line and not throw his bestie under the bus. So never referring to Donald Trump, he just referred to the administration. But in all fairness, I think Trump is probably in a pretty difficult position himself. Here's what his response was.
Yeah. Mr. President, Elon Musk in a television interview criticized the one big, beautiful bill, saying he was disappointed it didn't cut enough, essentially, that it undercut the Doge efforts. What's your reaction to that?
Well, the reaction's a lot of things. Number one, we have to get a lot of votes. We can't be cutting. We need to get a lot of support, and we have a lot of support. We had to get it through the House. The House was. We have no Democrats. If it's up to the Democrats, they'll take the 65% increase. If that doesn't get approved, this country is going to have a 65% increase in taxes and lots of other problems, big problems, almost bigger than that. But we'll have a 65% increase as opposed to the largest tax cut in the history of our country. We will be negotiating that bill, and I'm not happy about certain aspects of it, but I'm thrilled by other aspects of it. That's the way they go. It's very big. It's the big, beautiful bill, but the beautiful is because of all of the things we have. The biggest thing being, I would say, the level of tax cutting that we're going to be doing. We're going to make people really be able to. We'll have the lowest tax rate we've ever had in the history of our country, and tremendous amounts of benefit are going to the middle-income people of our country, low and middle-income people of our country. So we're going to see what happens, because the Senate, as you know, is negotiating with us, and they have to then go back to the House, and it's got a way to go. But I have to say, Speaker Johnson and Thune have done an incredible job. John Thune has done a fantastic job, and they're working together with me and others. And I think we have an amazing, if we pull this off, remember, we have 0 Democrat votes because they're bad people. There's something wrong with them. They'll let people pour into our country. Single biggest problem is we had 21 million people pour into our country, probably higher than that. And they're people that weren't supposed to be here. And many of those people are bad. Murderers, drug dealers, the mentally insane. They were closing mental institutions all over the world, not South America, all over the world. They're coming into our country, and we're getting them out. And we're having a hard time because some judges aren't making it very easy for us, and it's tough enough. They approved that. They allowed that to happen to our country. We don't have one Democrat vote. And if I were a Democrat, I'd be voting for this bill, and I'd get elected to any position I want as a Democrat. They're crazy. They're voting for a 65% tax increase. And they're only doing it for hatred. They're not doing it for any reason. They know it's terrible. Terrible politics, in my opinion. But so we have no Democrat votes. That means we have to get almost all Republican votes. And I think we're very close to doing that. I think it'll be very successful. Yep.
Tax cuts are Trump's focus. And tax cuts don't just get invented out of thin air. I mean, when you cut tax revenue, you're creating deficits unless you cut spending. Well, there is no will by the Democrats to cut $1 of spending. They're even happy to have fraud, waste, and abuse as part of the spending. But President Trump, I believe that where he's going with this is that if you give people a significant enough tax break, they will take that money that otherwise they would have sent to our federal government, and instead they will spend it. And when they spend it, it will get taxed, sales taxes at the local level, but it will fuel the economy on a global scale if we can increase that much revenue spend. And then that addition to our GDP will get taxed at the federal level at some point, and it will make up for the spending that accompanies this bill. I think that's what Trump's mindset is. We're going to have Rich McCormick here, Congressman from Georgia, to help us break it down, along with John McGuire, Congressman from Virginia, who will also talk to us about the one big, beautiful bill. I had a real spirited discussion about this with one of my good friends last night at dinner, and I took the position that I was not happy with Trump on this point because he has not cut spending like we were promised that he would, and that we're not going to be headed back next year towards the elimination of the deficit. And he got really agitated with me and basically said, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I can just tell you that I trust Donald Trump. And I thought about that, and I thought about his 4 years from 2017 to 2016 to 2020, and now the first 4 months of the second term. And virtually every time Donald Trump tells us something, it either turns out to be true, the most outlandish things. I mean, I remember when he told us that his campaign headquarters was bugged, and that it was being bugged by the FBI and the Obama administration. I thought he was just making it up, and it turned out to be absolutely true. You can go down the list from Russia to the perfect call with Zelensky. Just so many things he has told us. So it moved me basically from being disappointed with the big, beautiful bill to now neutral or slightly in favor of it, because in Trump I trust, just like my friend encouraged me to do so. So maybe this year we have an adjustment period. We give the Trump economic plan a chance to work. We allow tariffs to have their impact. They're going to bring new revenue to the federal government, and the investment that has been stimulated by tariffs being placed on manufacturing in foreign countries is going to return that manufacturing to America, $10 trillion of new investment. Think about all the new employment that's going to create. Think about all the construction jobs it's going to create. Trump might just be able to pull this off. I hope that he does. Well, as I said at the top of the show, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino lit a firestorm when they announced that Epstein, well, I'll let you hear it straight from them.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I don't know, folks. I don't know. The only thing that gives me pause is that I like Patel and Bongino so much. Patel less so than Bongino, but even though that segment appeared to me to have been rehearsed, I think they role played it before they went into the interview. Bongino didn't seem to be very comfortable to me in the interview. He looked like his body English wasn't reassuring. But I do admire these guys. I do believe they're truth brokers. But then I just wonder. I wonder if there is something that they are worried about sharing with us that is just so horrific that we can't handle it. I can handle it. I think you can handle it. But can the majority of the American people handle it? I just don't know, and I don't know what it could be. Or I don't know if the CIA has gotten to them, whether they're being blackmailed or whether they're being coerced or whether they're being paid. But I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that Epstein killed himself. And why do I say that? Well, we're going to tell you, and we're going to share exactly where my reservations come from, and they are largely summarized by Howard Stone or by Roger Stone in his latest blog that came out earlier this week. And we have got a great interview with Roger Stone. This is one of the smartest guys in American politics. I have huge admiration for him, and just getting to talk to him and talk about our history and his insights is thrilling for me. All right, well, this is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We come to you every Saturday from from noon to 2, rather, and from 1 to 3 on Sundays on the John Fredericks Radio Network in 7 cities on 20 AM and FM radio stations up and down the East Coast. We also come to you on CDM Press. They've got 13 newspapers up and down the East Coast of America, starting in Miami, all the way up into Northern Virginia, in Atlanta, in Colorado. And they stand for the truth, and they've been censored and throttled, but they continue to report and reflect true journalism. And we're so honored that they want to carry our show and share it with all of their listeners, they're on Getter and Rumble, and I don't know where else they pop up, Facebook and Twitter, I suspect. We're on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, Getter, and johngordon.tv. And finally, I love to hear from you guys. First of all, I can hear from you right now on Getter, where normally we have up to 6,000 people by the end of the show, and we have a lot of people interacting with us there. So come and join us on Getter right now. You can watch the clips that we show as we live stream them to you. You can interact with us there. But everyone can write me at johngordontruth@gmail.com, and I read every email. I respond to every email, and I definitely take what you say seriously and give a lot of thought to your input and comments. I truly want to be educational. I want to be entertaining. Sometimes we achieve that, sometimes we don't. But I most importantly and most significantly am only interested in delivering you the truth. And we work very hard every Sunday to Friday putting this show together. Producer Anthony sitting right over here, sending the feed out on our live streams and sending the feed up to Richmond for the John Fredericks Network. We play devil's advocate with one another. We research, we read, and we talk about the points that we're going to cover. And we truly do try and get it right. So now let's go to our first interview. We've got Jay Beeber. He's with the National Motorist Society, and he thinks your car ownership is in danger. I don't know. Here's Jay Beeber. You be the judge. People really like their cars. When I talk to people about the autonomous driving automobiles that we're right on the forefront of, they're like, I don't want to give up my ability and my enjoyment of driving. Well, I think our next guest, Jay Beeber, the Executive Director of Policy at the National Motorist Association, may be inclined to agree. I don't know. What do you say, Jay?
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Thank you.
Well, look, automated vehicles can be very helpful, especially for those people who can't drive, like people who are elderly or somebody who is somehow impaired and disabled, can't get behind the wheel. But our concern with automated vehicles is how much control the government or the tech company that makes the car might have over the person. So, for example, if you want to control the person or the person's behavior, it's much easier to control the machine than it is to control the human being. So that's kind of where a lot of our concerns are. Also with to do with the privacy aspects of it as well. Who's going to collect all the data on where the car's going and where, when and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and I would just say, what privacy? I mean, I just don't, I think the minute you walk out of your home, and maybe even before you walk out of your home, I'm almost sure that Alexa knows all of my secrets. I don't know that for a fact, but she is ever present. Sometimes she just speaks up without being prompted.
Yeah, I have the same thing. Well, we don't use Alexa. We don't have any of the smart devices in our house that at least will theoretically listen to you, except for your smartphone. And we try to turn that down as much as possible as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think people would be shocked at, especially for the newer cars, how much data those cars are collecting about you, your movements, what you do in the car, everything about you. And then that data is being collected by the manufacturers and then sold off to data brokers who then sell it to the highest bidder in terms of those people that want to know about you.
Well, that is a fact. I happen to have a Tesla, and I know it's recording everything about my driving habits, where I'm going, how long I've been there, and how fast I drove to get there, and where I parked. I mean, but I don't worry about it because I live a pretty boring life, I think. And so, I mean, somebody would have to be really wanting for something to do to be interested in how fast I'm driving down Olive Avenue right over here where I frequent.
Yeah, well, I think it's not so much what's happening now; it's what the future holds. And as we've seen, there's been a steady erosion of our privacy and our personal liberties. And certainly we know that the government continues to take power as it can. And even the private companies, I mean, look, right now we see that certain browsers, certain tech companies, if they don't like what you're looking at or what you're going to look at, they will limit your results in, let's say, Google or one of those companies. If they're controlling the car, maybe they don't like where you're going or what you're doing, or those sorts of things. As far as the insurance rates that you have, the cars are collecting information like how fast do you accelerate, how hard do you brake, do you steer in a certain way that they feel is that's aggressive driving. And of course, they're the ones that get to make that decision. So and then they sell this data off to the to your insurance companies, and your insurance company can raise your rates, and for that reason. So again, there's a lot of reasons why you want to be careful about how much information you give out there. Here's something that most people probably don't know. If you have your Bluetooth on when you are driving your car, if you're connected to the car, you just have it on, there are Bluetooth readers that anybody can get off of Amazon right now, and that includes the government, and they can put that at the side of the road and just collect data on all of the Bluetooth signatures that pass a particular point. If they want to put those all over the place and have a picture of where that particular Bluetooth goes every day, they can get a pretty good picture about everything about your life.
So what's your organization's position on the congestion tax that is certainly the subject of a lot of controversy and conversation these days in New York City?
Well, obviously we're not in favor of additional taxing. And people have spent their tax dollars building those roads, and therefore you should be able to drive on those roads unrestricted. In this particular case, the congestion pricing scheme is really not a congestion pricing scheme. It's a driving pricing scheme, which is that they just simply want to charge you extra for going to a certain part of Manhattan, which is a popular part of Manhattan, because they want the money for something else. They say it's for congestion, but it's really just like, hey, how can we extract a little bit more money out of folks? And New York does this in many ways. It does it with regards to all the additional automated enforcement that's usually set to ding you for the slightest of little infractions, or for speed limits that are ridiculously low in the city, or for red lights when the yellow light time is way too short for the intersection. All those sorts of things, ways just because they see people, they see the individuals, especially people in cars, as ATMs. They don't see them as human beings that have to do things and get around and do what they have to do and live their lives.
Well, what bad motivation would a bureaucrat have for setting a speed limit artificially low? I mean, what is
There's a couple of reasons. Number one is more control over your life. So let's say you just don't like people who drive cars. You don't want people to have the freedom to get in their car and go where they want to go. You think driving a car is terrible for the environment because you're spewing out whatever you're concerned about that's coming out of the tailpipe. Used to be really noxious things. Now it's just CO2 that people are concerned about. So if you want to restrict the amount of driving that people do, the best way to do that is to slow everybody down, make driving as slow as possible, make driving as difficult as possible, as expensive as possible with additional fines and fees, and lower speed limits is one way to do that. You can set a ridiculously low speed limit. Look, we've all seen speed traps around the country that are pretty obvious. So why do they do that? Well, they do it to raise revenue. They do it to restrict your movements, and that's the reason. We fight for this. Where we got our start. We're the organization that started fighting the 55-mile-an-hour national speed limit back in the 70s and the 80s, and we won that fight. We realized that this is a problem all over the place, which is that speed limits oftentimes are just set unrealistically. They're set unsafely. Some people think it's a safety measure. They think that putting a particular number on the sign is going to make things safer. It doesn't. But there's a host of reasons.
Well, if I recall, the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit was really more of an environmental response to the oil shortage that prompted that. But isn't it true that once we removed the 55-mile-per-hour limitation, went back to 70, that automobile fatalities increased?
No, it's not true. Actually, automobile fatalities continue to go down. If you look at the history of automobile fatalities per vehicle mile traveled, it's a huge slope all the way down, and there was no decrease or greater decrease during the time there was a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and there was no increase after the speed limits were increased. So, partially here's why: because driving on the highway is actually safer than driving on surface streets. Highways, especially, are the safest place to drive, even though you're going very fast. So this idea that speed kills or speed is bad, not necessarily true. Highways are built for speed, and they're built for people to drive fast. So
I actually agree with you, which is why I taught my sons, I have 3 sons, how to drive on the interstate, because really all they had to do is maintain their lane and keep a safe distance from the car in front of them. We're going to be safe. I felt that was much safer than teaching them to drive on the surface streets where people's behavior is a lot less predictable.
Right, and so by lowering the speed limit on the interstates, it discouraged people from driving on the interstate, or if they want to go faster, didn't matter which road they took, the surface street or the interstate. So they shifted more driving to surface streets, which means that there will actually be more collisions, more fatalities, and so it's actually not a safety measure, even though it may look like it on the surface.
So you really believe that there is an anti-car movement and that this is tantamount to tyranny. Help us understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so there is a very strong movement. It's not just in the United States, it's around the world. It is a very, very strong anti-car, sort of anti-technology, anti-middle-class movement. It's part of a number of different movements, but one movement is the environmental movement. For example, like I mentioned earlier, people who just simply think that you're a terrible person and you're destroying the planet if you get in your car and you drive to the grocery store or you take your kids to soccer practice. They'd rather you be on a bicycle or take public transit or live in a dense urban environment where you don't need a car, you don't have a car, you don't have as many choices in your life. And so that's part of it. There's just a whole group of people that simply don't like you having the choice to go where you want to go, when you want to go, how you want to go. There's a bunch of safety advocates, and it's hard to tell exactly where they are on some of this stuff, but ostensibly they claim that there's a roadway safety crisis, and therefore we have to reduce driving to save lives, although driving is actually the safest that it's been since cars were invented.
What do you attribute that to?
The safety in vehicles is a number of things. First of all, there's cars are better and they're safer. There's a lot more safety technology. There was a huge jump and a huge benefit when they figured out why people were dying in cars. So for example, when they fixed the problem with windshields, and there was people used to crash and go through the windshield. Now windshields are made so you don't go through the windshield and get killed that way. There's crumple zones in vehicles. There's airbags, obviously. There's seat belts. There's a whole bunch of safety options. Newer cars have even more technology. Not all of it is the greatest, but some of it can help in certain situations. And so we have improved the technology. Roadways have gotten better. They've figured things out from an engineering, from a technological standpoint, and things will continue to get better.
So you don't think people have actually become better drivers? They're just fewer consequences for getting in an automobile accident. But
absolutely, and also our medicine has gotten better. So if somebody does get into an automobile accident, we can get people to the hospital faster. Once they get there, we have better technology to save their lives. So there's a whole host of reasons why our fatality rates have gone down over the years. And if you think about, going back to speed for just a moment, if you think about it, people, cars were not as comfortable driving as fast as they drive now. So and the fatality rate was higher back then. So if you look at, let's say, from the beginning of driving in the 20s, when they started collecting all this data per vehicle mile travels, we've reduced fatalities by 95, 98%. I mean, this is a huge improvement in terms of safety. And if it were any other thing like, let's say, cancer, and you said, oh, we reduced cancer fatalities by 95%, people would think it was the greatest thing in the world. Instead, there's a whole bunch of people out there saying we have a roadway safety crisis and we have to take cars off the road and limit the number of miles that people drive every year.
Well, we do have 45,000 fatalities a year in the United States, 2 million worldwide, and untold numbers of people who suffer debilitating injuries from being in automobile accidents. Isn't that a fair problem to try and attack?
It is a fair problem trying to attack, but again, from a statistical standpoint, the chance that any individual will die in a car accident is extremely low. It's just that we have a lot of people in cars, and if you talk about around the world, a lot of the safety aspects of driving that we have in the United States do not exist in other countries. So the fatality rates are much higher. But the answer to that is not to curtail people's freedom or the ability to get around or the ability to do what you need to do. But the answer is just better safety improvements. It's not restricting people's movements.
Well, that I agree with you. If the consequences is a loss of freedom, I think that that is a huge competing factor in the equation. But we also have smog. I mean, I grew up in Atlanta. Well, no, actually, I grew up in Macon, Georgia, south of Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta as an adult, where I've spent the last 40 years, and I never had allergies until I moved to Atlanta. And Atlanta is a bad place for smog, just like LA is. I mean, those are real problems, don't you think?
Yeah, and we have lots of real problems in the world. Everything in life is a trade-off. The automobile is probably the greatest invention ever made to improve prosperity and to improve your personal freedom to be able to get where you want to go. Think about what life used to be like before there were automobiles. Rarely commerce is available, so it's a great invention. Yes, there are trade-offs, but then again, there are trade-offs in everything else, and what we should do is we should try to improve the areas where we can. You say, for example, with smog and those sorts of things. Again, the technology has improved so much, and cars have improved so much that we've reduced, say, NO emissions by, I think, somewhere like 90% from what they used to be. So things have gotten a lot better. The air in LA is much cleaner, and then when it was back in the 70s and 60s, and so there's improvements that can be made. The answer just can't be, hey, we just have to reduce how much people drive or how much where they can go or when they can go there.
Well, I agree with you when you put it in the context of personal freedom. But what if there are alternatives to having your own car? I mean, when you think about it, my understanding is that we use our car about maybe less than 10% of the time, yet it's for some people the most expensive asset that they own. If there were more economical and better ways to move about, wouldn't you favor that if you could have your cake and eat it too?
Of course, if there was, but the problem is that there is no other form of transportation that gives you the type of freedom that a personal automobile does. That's on demand. That where you can just get in your car, it's sitting in your driveway. Yes, people may use it only 10% of the time, but for example, there's no other form of transportation that will get you to the number of jobs, job options that in most places that a personal automobile will get you to. Say Manhattan, maybe not, maybe that's a special case, but there are very, very few places in the United States that are like that. And still, there's a lot of people who drive cars in Manhattan. But if you want to pull somebody out of poverty, there's been studies that have been done by very liberal institutions that have shown that if you want to help pull somebody out of poverty and they don't have a car, one of the best ways to do that is to get them a car. They have more options in terms of jobs, educational opportunities, and just, personal things that they want to do in terms of recreation. It's much better for your life to have access. Most people who don't have a car aspire to have one.
So where I was kind of headed with that, I agree with everything that you've said. Those statements really are not debatable. But, I am an early adapter. I do have a Tesla. I do have full self-driving. And the robo-taxi is about to be unveiled in Austin, Texas in a matter of days. This is where you can summon an automobile on your cell phone, and it will come to you and take you to your point of destination without a driver. Now, I think that is hugely exciting. The theory is then that same robo-taxi can pick me up and take me to work, but then since you like to sleep in, as you earlier said before we came on the air, that it can come and take you and pick you up and take you to work or to lunch, which would increase the utility value of automobiles and have the corollary effect of reducing the number of automobiles that are actually on the road. So what are your thoughts about the possibilities of robo-taxis and sharing the resource?
Here's the thing. Our organization is really focused on freedom. So, freedom of choice. So if there's a better alternative, if there's a something that shows up at your house and it doesn't have a driver in it and that's safer, great. We certainly don't have any objection to that. We don't feel like somebody has to be behind the wheel. There are people that may feel that way, but that's not something that we take on. We feel that with regards to cars and personal automobiles, that A, you should continue to be able to own a personal vehicle, and B, you should be able to drive it if you want to. And unfortunately, let's say some of the companies like the robo-taxi companies, they have basically stated that their model for the future is that nobody will own a personal vehicle. Their technology, their service will be how you get around. That may be good for some people, but maybe not everybody wants that. And obviously, we want to preserve the personal choice that if you do want your own personal vehicle and not have to rely on a separate company, that you have the freedom to do that.
Well, I think you've given very rational and logical explanations. And actually, we are totally aligned, which is disappointing from a broadcast standpoint because we don't have anything to argue about. And that's why people tune in. Well, Jay, it's been a pleasure. And you have really given us a lot to think about. And we've enjoyed having you on. I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Anytime.
Thanks. Today's show has been brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. Perfect Circle collects waste vegetable oil from restaurants, services their grease traps, takes all the waste products back to their plant right there in the central part of Atlanta, and refines it for the production of biodiesel fuel. Biodiesel burns cleaner and has better lubricating qualities than diesel fuel, and it also helps reduce our dependency on foreign oil, making us less energy dependent on some of our adversaries. So perfectcirclerenewableenergy.com, PCRenergy.com. Look them up on the web. And if you are in the restaurant business and need someone to service your restaurants for grease traps, remove your waste vegetable oil, and do deep cleaning, they also provide containment and containers for your waste oil. Look up PCRenergy.com on the web. Give them a call and sign up today. They are a great company. They don't have automated attendance. You'll get a live person on the line, and the service is at no charge. So call them up, and if you're tired of poor service, slow service, and indifferent service, try PCRE. You'll have a much better experience. Joining us now to talk about the federal budget and the one big beautiful bill is none other than Congressman Rich McCormick from my home state of Georgia. Congressman McCormick, and I hope you don't mind me saying my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks, my friend. It's good to be with you today. I'm excited about prospects of getting something done that's going to actually benefit the American people, something that's going to be new, fresh, and innovative for politics, I think, especially once the Senate gets done with it. I'm excited.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And you are someone, and I'm not saying this to butter you up. I mean, I'm not seeking a political favor. I don't know what it would be, but you're an extraordinary person. You served in the military. You served as a physician in the military. You've been a trauma room physician. You've got, I believe, 2 lovely daughters and have had a wonderful career. And now you're a United States congressman. And you had to fight to get that seat. And I'm really proud of the job that you've done. So we passed the one big, beautiful bill. And by just the skin of our teeth, I think it passed by 1 vote in the House. Is that right?
That's right. We had, I believe, I can't remember if it was Chip Roy or somebody else that abstained. Actually, it was Andy Harris, the head of the Freedom Caucus, who abstained. And for idealistic reasons, he's a good guy. He's also a physician. He's a conservative that didn't think we did enough and didn't want to tank the bill, though, because he knew that if we tank the bill, then we're going to let good become the enemy of great. And it doesn't save enough, quite frankly. It doesn't for those of us who are fiscal conservatives. As a matter of fact, next year we'll increase our debt by another $415 billion, in large part due to the SALT. The SALT increases of $385 billion extra dollars going to be tacked onto that, which basically makes us go further in debt. And as you know, we're really in trouble right now. This is going to come back to us in spades. Our kids are going to be paying for this. So he abstained. We were able to pass it. The good news is, and I just scared everybody with that big number that I just basically said, we're approaching $500 billion more in spending, not less, more. But I think the Senate's going to be able to strip out the SALT and actually get rid of some of the IRA provisions that were passed during the Biden administration. And we'll get back to something that at least is deficit neutral, which we haven't done in a very long time. Remember that every year the quote-unquote mandatory spending, or what we call non-discretionary spending, increases automatically. So that's what really kills us. And between Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, if we don't get something under control, we're going to lose it. We're not voting to cut it. We're voting it to save it. And Social Security and Medicare will both go bankrupt in the next presidency. Not this one. Next one, you'll have automatic cuts of 21% and 11% respectively. And we're in trouble if we don't do something about it right now.
Where does the impetus for all of the irrational, irresponsible spending come from? I thought that when Trump got back in office, especially with the talent that he's assembled from Bessent at the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce, who actually said, Mr. President, let's balance the budget. We're a long ways from balancing the budget. Where does the impetus for this irrational spending come from? I mean, it feels like there is a puppet master that's pulling the strings that cannot be reined in.
Well, most of it is habit, quite frankly. This started during the Bush era, George W. Bush, 2004, when we increased massive spending in Medicare. Once again, good cause, but there's always a good cause. And here's a little dirty little secret. This is what the Democrats do to us. They always have a good thing to spend on, free health care, right? We need to increase Medicare. We need to increase Medicaid, all things for poor people. And it sounds great until, like Margaret Thatcher said, until you run out of other people's money. And the truth is, if you gave everything the Democrats wanted this year for spending, next year they come back with something else because they always have to have something to promise to people to buy their votes with your money. That's the way they do it. And for any of those in my party who think that you're going to out-left the left, and I know there's a bunch of moderates out there, and God love you, I need you for the majority, but if you try to out-left the left, you'll never do it. If your vote is contingent on being left enough to stay in office, you're not going to stay in office. That comes across as disingenuous. It comes across as tax and spend. And that's why we've gotten in this habit of spending too much, because we try to buy other people's votes. And quite frankly, in President Trump's first term, we did a poor job of controlling this. We're in a bad muscle memory habit of spending money. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in Congress, you always want to do people favors, and it's got to stop. This is for the good of the nation now. It means you got to tighten your belt. And I'll say one more caveat, too. Elon Musk, who I respect very, very much, when he was out at Jackson Hole at a group meeting before he was into politics, was asked, what can the Republican Party do better? And he said, I feel a little uncomfortable because I'm not a Republican, but if I was to be honest, I think you guys could come across as more compassionate. In other words, when you cut people's jobs, when you do the things you got to do in order to save programs, you don't celebrate it. Now, ironically, it was Elon that had the golden chainsaw, and I told him, I said, look, this is a necessary thing. I'm glad you're doing it, but if we celebrate it when veterans and Republicans and Democrats are all being cut from their jobs, it's not going to be palatable. So we just have to be careful. As you know, my attitude is make sure that we're doing it in a way that's palatable. That's the magic of Reagan, is that when you're doing the right thing, you still got to realize that it's going to cause some suffering, but we got to get it done for the American people.
Well, I liked what George W. Bush said, or George Herbert Walker Bush. I was not a huge fan. That's a whole different conversation. But he said we needed a kinder, more gentler nation. And I agree with him. And I don't really see anyone who has taken the position of Martin Luther King on in a white person or a black person or a brown person, any person who has become a uniter and someone who can help bridge the divide. But, you know, the Democrats, they lie to the American people. When you talk about cutting veterans and other people's jobs, they weren't really cutting jobs from people who were coming to work. They were cutting jobs from people who wouldn't respond to an email saying, what did you do last week? And they acted like it was some sort of an invasive, horrible thing to demand of someone to say, what did you do? I mean, I've had to answer to somebody, what did I do last week? Virtually my entire life, if not to my boss, to my employees. And so I think we all have to have accountability. What's the matter with having people being accountable who take a paycheck from the federal government? And it's
and let's have an honest conversation with this, because I had Doug Collins came in and talked to the Doctors Caucus. He said, look, some people who are good, who show up to work, are going to lose their jobs because we don't need those jobs. The government's way too big. Now, it doesn't, once again, there are a lot of people who don't do a good job. Everybody knows, has horror stories of government workers who don't care. They're just there to collect a paycheck. But there's some good people that we just don't have room for anymore. And we are so bloated, and we've expanded government so large. And this includes the military, by the way. Remember, Hegseth is going to trim, I think, 10% of the officer corps from the Army, as well as some of the other services, just because we're too bloated, too top heavy, which means some good people are going to lose their job. But that is necessary. We can't sugarcoat it. We just got to say, look, we're going to find other ways to provide jobs, because when you have a great economy, and I think President Trump's doing all the right things for the economy, when you have a great economy, there's going to be plenty of jobs that aren't government jobs, that don't come out of your pocket, but come out of a company that's actually profitable and growing and has benefited from the policies of our government, not created because the size of the government. And that's the difference. And we have to be honest about that conversation, that, you know, there's a little transition pain, but in the long run, we're going to be much better off. We're not going to be reliant on a government job that has no future, that has no ceiling, or has too much of a ceiling, I should say, because there's no upward mobility. This is good for everybody when we get back to privateering and capitalism, because it's what has made America the greatest country in the entire world.
So, Tyler, if you would, please get that clip ready for Rand Paul. I want to play it for Congressman McCormick and our listeners. But you all had a real dogfight to get this across the line in the House. And as I've watched the Sunday morning shows and read the newspapers and the Wall Street Journal, it sounds to me like we may be in for a really rough road in the Senate. And this is what Rand Paul just had to say about the one big beautiful bill this weekend, if we can roll that clip.
Spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion. This year in September, when our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, well, that's Bidenomics, that's Biden spending levels. When March, every Republican, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a $2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction. The idea that we're going to explode deficits, and the projections are now looking at over $3 trillion in deficits over the next 10 years, I think is just...
Congressman, I listened to that, and then I listened to Ron Johnson, senator from Minnesota. Or Wisconsin, I think. And he basically said, look, I don't even want to be here. Serving in the United States Senate is not the end all and be all to me. If I go back home, I'll be perfectly fine. Ergo, Trump is not going to bully me, twist my arm, or cajole me into voting for this bill, period. And he said that. What do you think?
Well, let me say, first of all, there's some things that are very, very important that Rand Paul and others have said is basically we're at a critical point where, once again, you can have 4 great years of President Trump, and I'm a big fan of President Trump's. But at the same time, next presidency, you'll have automatic cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and your budget, which continues to bloom. And this is where we get really concerned, where you'll next year have around 3.8 trillion in deficit spending. Realize that our entire budget is around 7 trillion right now, and it's getting bigger. So when does it stop? And Rand Paul is a true conservative, and he's not going to be bullied. None of these guys are going to be bullied. But I tell you what, I took a huge pay cut to be the most unpopular man I've ever been. I used to be a popular guy, people like Marines, people like doctors. Then you get into Congress and half of the United States hates you instantly. And that doesn't even count the divisiveness inside of your primary political party. So I think they're onto something when they say, if not now, when? If we're not going to address the deficit spending in a realistic way, then when are we ever going to do it? This is our last chance, quite frankly. We just got downgraded for the second time by Moody's on our currency. We're about to lose our standard in the world as the world standard of currency. In other words, it used to be gold. That went away in, I think, 1972 in Bretton Woods, and it replaced it with the United States because we had the strongest economy. If we continue this woeful spending, we're in trouble. Now, I think that we can get them on board, and the nice thing is they have the leverage because you have about 4 super conservative senators that can twist arms and say, we don't need SALT. SALT is, for those who don't understand what SALT is, it's basically saying for the liberal states like California and New York that have the highest tax rates, they can deduct more of their taxes and not pay those taxes than their federal taxes, which means we make up for it. New York used to pay more than they actually got. Now they're paying $1 for every $1.06 that they receive back in federal tax spending. When the federal government used to only make up for 1/3 of all spending for government, now is 2/3 of all spending, where you have some states that we pay 90% of the bill for their Medicaid, when Medicaid was meant to be an entirely state-run program for health care. It's a safety net. That is why we're in the position we're in right now, is because states have to balance their budget, but the federal government doesn't. So we just keep on printing it, and it's going to crush our future generations. It's going to crush our economy. And if it doesn't come this presidency, it will definitely come the next presidency. And I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat, you will not be able to deal with it. So I think it's a good thing to have this sort of accountability, that we don't just pass something willy-nilly and say, it's okay, it's the best we can get. No, we can do better. And I think it's about time that we get some senators and some backbone that are going to actually do better than we did in Congress and actually shape our future so we can actually get a hold of this before it becomes something that we can never dig our way out of.
So the margin in the Senate is as narrow as it is in the House, basically. Can the bill pass if Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, and I think there's one other senator who said that they're not going to vote for it as is? What happens? How do you get to? How does the reconciliation process work? And will they be able to come to the middle and get a bill passed?
Well, let's start with SALT, right? So let's say the senators, we have no senators in California or New York. Why would we want the SALT, which adds $385 billion to our debt next year alone? Why would we want to strip it out? There you go. Now you're already down instead of 415 billion. You just stripped out 385 instantly. Now get rid of some of the IRA provisions. Once again, conservative things. Why would any Republican be against that? If we could get back to deficit neutral for the first time in a very, very long time, that's a win. Even though it's still too much, we're still building deficit spending. At least get back to let those senators have their effect. Let them get what they want. Let's pass it back to the House and do the things that we didn't do right in the House, and we can pass it. I love the fact that they have some leverage. You and I, as ultra-conservatives, as people who want to see the future of this nation secured, want to have that accountability piece. I kind of look at myself as like the last samurai. When I voted against the last CR in December, I think there was, 32 of us that voted, maybe 34 that voted against it. 100% of all Democrats voted for it. Why? Because it's a bad bill. Continuing spending at Democratic levels during the Biden administration, during the Pelosi spending levels, and we're still spending those. 40% of our FEMA emergency funds went to COVID this last year. Are you kidding me? It's time to have accountability. So I'm glad we're getting some accountability in the Senate. I hope we do have some changes that are significant. And the president has said loud and clear, hey, I'm actually for some of those because I think it's going to do us some good. So
I heard him say that. I was surprised, but you're right. He did say that over the weekend. And so that does give me hope that we can have some rational spending and some reforms. But do you think Nancy Pelosi is stupid?
Hell no.
No, I'm serious. I mean, do you think she is just, you think Jerry Nadler is just stupid?
No, these people are conniving. We have to realize that they will always do things and then blame us for it. And they want to win elections, and they'll use everything in the government to buy votes for it. And without the government's money, and I'm reading a book right now on the rise of Lyndon B. Johnson, just to kind of figure out.
Oh my gosh, don't ruin I hadn't had breakfast yet. Don't get me started on him.
But he was Machiavellian, and he masterfully used government spending to buy votes, and that's what they do. That's what they do. And we have to be smart to not underestimate our enemies and realize that these people are not dumb. They're very conniving. They're liars. They're dishonest, and sometimes they're just plain stupid. And I don't want to call anybody stupid by name, but some of them just aren't educated in economics and in reality, and so they lie to themselves as well as the people.
There is undoubtedly a contingency of people like that in Congress, no question. And in any institution, public or private, there's always incompetence, ineptness. And so Congress is not immune from that either. But the point that I'm making is, I don't think Nancy Pelosi is stupid. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries is stupid. I don't think Jerry Nadler is stupid. So why would you want to literally bankrupt the greatest country in the history of mankind? And that is exactly the road that we're on, because this level of government deficit spending is not sustainable. Right now, interest on the federal debt surpasses the Defense Department budget. It is the largest single line item in the federal budget. There will come a point that we will not be able to pay the interest on the debt. And who has the majority of the United States debt? China. This is dangerous.
Actually, here's what's interesting. China, very connivingly, has divested from foreign investment in America because they're trying to accelerate that process where the interest rates goes up on our borrowing and we have to pay more. So they actually used to be our number one. Now it's actually Japan, because China is divesting $300 billion from their investment in our debt because they want to see our economy crumble. They see themselves as not just a peer, but they want to be ahead of us, and they're doing a lot of things to make that happen. Now, they have some disadvantages. Their population is shrinking. Their realty market is crumbling. They've overspent on a lot of things overseas, but they have a huge advantage because their Federal Reserve, and we all have some sort of banking system, is owned by them. So when they pay interest, they're paying interest to themselves. Our Federal Reserve is privatized. First of all, it's neither federal nor is it reserve, and if it goes bankrupt, we'll be the ones that bail them out, not vice versa. So I'm not a big fan of the Federal Reserve in general. There's a really good book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I highly recommend people read it because, first of all, it'll make you mad. Then it'll scare you to see how much power these people have by running up our debt. And they've always had a reason. In the past, it was wars. And then the guy predicted that would be climate change. Because, of course, you got to spend extra money to save the world from climate change. But he never understood the power of fear when it came to COVID and how fast we ramped up the spending, which we have never stepped back on. And if you look at the difference between World War II, when we ramped up and then we ramped back down, we never ramped back after the 2008 housing crisis. We never ramped back after the COVID crisis. And that's why we're on this trajectory. We're addicted to government spending, which we just print off with the modern monetary theory mindset. And Democrats believe that we can just keep on printing money and the bill will never come to pay.
Well, the chickens are going to come home to roost at some point. And I hope it's after I've left this earth. I have a great life. I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, but I'm just telling you, I really am worried about this, and mainly for my children and my granddaughter and soon to be grandson. And this country has been so good to me and my family. And I mean, it's the greatest social experiment that's ever been conducted that I'm aware of in the history of man. And Benjamin Franklin said, we've given you a republic if you can keep it. And I think he had the foresight to know that in a republic, you could buy votes. And at some point, there will become a tipping point, and it will cause you to lose the republic. And that's what I fear. And that's why I cannot get inside of the head of these people that I've been talking about, who I don't think are dumb. But don't they have children and grandchildren? And don't they want to preserve this great nation? And do they really want to put it at risk for their own greed and lust for power? I just don't know.
Well, I think a balanced budget amendment would be a big step in the right direction. Yesterday, I was speaking to a large crowd on Memorial Day, and it occurred to me, every other country loses their own, military folks and stuff like that. So what's the difference between us and every other nation that's had heroes and warriors that believe in their country, dying for their country? And the biggest difference I can think of is that when we go, by and large, with a voluntary military force, even during World War II, people were volunteering. Professional sports people volunteering for something that's not because we have a dictator, not because we have a monarch, not because we have a theocracy, not even because we have a president, but because they believe in the power of the people that are actually stronger than a government, that this government was created for one purpose and one purpose only, to defend our rights, not to lord over us, not to regulate us, not to tax us, not to make sure that we do the right thing, but to make sure that they protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as God has given us, and no country can take away from us. And that is the difference between our sacrifice as warriors for those great people that I wear one on my wrist right now. Kevin Shea, who died 20 years ago in Iraq, and he died with that idea that this country is not about any politician, not about any leadership, not about any government. It's about the individual, the ultimate minority that we represent and protect. And that's what this is all about. And the only way you preserve that is making sure that the government doesn't put us in a situation where we'll never be able to bail ourselves out, and our children will always be indebted to a socialist government, because that's the only way you can survive at that point. And nobody will borrow our money anymore. So
that is so well said, Congressman. And you captured the sentiment that I've been sensing. And I thought about this yesterday. Where did you celebrate Memorial Day?
I was in Alpharetta at a memorial with a bunch of veterans and just good patriots. I was just so moved. The taps playing, just the reflection on what it really means, and to see people, young people too, show up. Hundreds and hundreds of people just to pay their respects, and God bless them, because that's. Last night we had a drink for a couple of buddies that died on the rugby team that we played for in the Marines. 40 people are gone since 9/11 that I played rugby with in the Marine Corps. That's a daunting thought.
That is a significant data.
They love
point.
their country.
Well, and that's the sense that I had yesterday when I was watching President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary Hegseth, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs at Arlington Cemetery. In this country, when we want to celebrate, we remember and celebrate the people that have paid the ultimate price for our freedom. When you watch the celebration in Russia or in China, what do they celebrate? the tanks and the missiles driving down the main road in the Capitol. It is a much different culture and a much different value system. And I think you touched on it in what you just said, and that's worth saving. That's something very special in the world today, and I am so grateful to you for your service to our country on more than one battlefield, as well as all the people. My brother was very successful in his career. He retired at age 50, and he went into the Air Force Reserves. And he served for a total of 35 years. And sadly, I just went to Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago to attend his interment at Arlington Cemetery. And if our listeners have not had the opportunity to go to Arlington, I really encourage you to do so. It is overwhelming when you see the 450,000 graves of fallen servicemen and women, and people like my brother who did not serve in combat, but received a full military burial in Arlington with an honor guard and a band and a 21-gun salute overlooking the Washington Monument. It really does put you in touch with the sacrifices that have gone into making this country great. And it just fills my heart with appreciation and patriotism for our country. And Benjamin Franklin was right. If we can keep it, and it is worth preserving. It is worth every member of our society working to keep this country great. Thank you, Congressman Rich McCormick from Georgia. You are so nice and generous with your time. Thank you so much. And you've given us great insights. And I really appreciate your comments on the budget and hope that we're successful in getting a good bill done.
Well, it's my honor. Great to be with you. God bless everybody who's listening. Semper Fidelis.
Well, I'm very happy to welcome Representative John McGuire. He is from Virginia's 5th Congressional District to the show this morning. Congressman McGuire, it is an honor and a privilege.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be on the show. I was actually in Arlington yesterday with President Trump, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, and everyone else. And a lot of tears there. It's a very solemn, sacred ground. But freedom isn't free, and we really are the home of the free because of the brave. But I was there. What an inspirational moment in our history to be there with that group of people. And I ran into a bunch of World War II veterans and listened to their stories. The average age of the World War II veterans I spoke with yesterday were 99 years old. And they say there's less than 1,000 World War II veterans still with us. To be able to be there and listen to their stories about their brothers or sisters that they lost on the battlefield was inspiring.
Well, I was talking before you came on about what it means to be conservative and what it means to be MAGA, and how the Democrats try and label that as something bad. I actually wear it as a badge of honor because I believe that it reflects the principles on which this nation was founded. And saying prayer in school is certainly not objectionable to me. Saluting the flag is not objectionable to me. Standing for law and order is not objectionable to me. And so why it's objectionable to the liberal Democrats and the people that want to make this a communist country is bewildering to me, because it would seem to me that they would want to live in a free country. I just can't sort it out. But so you're a new member of Congress. What has it been like? Share us with us your experience so far and your impressions.
Sure. Well, I joked with a reporter. I said, I've been there over 120 days. I've got it all figured out. I've got no more questions. But just joking about that. No, it's just a huge honor as a veteran. I see it as a way to continue service to our country. There's some amazing patriots up there that they just do it. They're doing it for the right reason. I mean, certainly there's corruption and everything else we've heard about, but there's also a lot of good people up there that put the hours in, that really love our country, and to be amongst those folks is just a true honor. And I'm a limited government kind of guy. In Virginia's General Assembly, I had the highest award for conservatism. But if we should do anything, we should keep our people safe. And so President Trump's support of peace through strength, supporting our law enforcement, to rule of law, to securing the border, to making sure that our military veterans have the right equipment, the right training, so they can, God forbid, win a fight if we have to go to war and come back, have a chance to come back alive. I mean, to be part of all that is a huge honor.
Well, it certainly is, and it sounds like that you've earned your stripes, and we appreciate the service. You were a Navy SEAL, if my understanding is correct, and that's a sacrifice to do that for your country.
Well, there are many ways to serve, and my service is no better than anyone else's. But there are a lot of veterans in Congress. They say that the percentage is lower than normal, and historically our country does better when we have more veterans. But we have 6 Navy SEALs in the House of Representatives, and my good friend, Navy SEAL Tim Sheehy, is in the U.S. Senate. And Speaker Mike Johnson said he thinks we've reached the Navy SEAL quota. But one of my Navy SEAL members of Congress, Derek Van Orden, said, no, we're only halfway there. But no, it's a great way to continue service to our country. There's probably 5,000 different subjects. People come to visit you. Obviously you're testifying or you're interrogating witnesses or cross-examining them in committees. You're writing letters, you're making phone calls, and people are visiting you from different industries. But people come to see you from everything from farmers to pharmaceuticals to national defense to law enforcement. I mean, every issue you could imagine. And in addition to that, we have a district team that's all over the Virginia 5th Congressional District, which is almost 800,000 people, 24 county, cities, and towns. I'm sure you may know it's Charlottesville, Lynchburg, Danville are the major cities, but it also goes east to Doswell, Kings Dominion, close to Richmond, down to Mecklenburg, South Boston. But you have a big team in D.C., and every day we're answering phone calls, helping constituents get passports. We helped a veteran recently who had tried for years to get a $22,000 claim from the VA, and we helped him get that claim. We've helped people get IRS claims or problem solve, Social Security, and everything else. There's a lot of facets to the job, but we have a great team, and we're learning and getting better every day.
So I worry about our country. I'm optimistic. I'm not, sitting here obsessing about it, but I do obsess about certain things like who killed Kennedy. How did Building 7 come down? What is in the Epstein files that is so horrendous that we can't see them? Who did orchestrate the attempted assassination on President Trump in Butler? Do you believe in the deep state? Do you believe that there is a shadow government?
Everybody has an axe to grind, and I think America has many enemies. You probably hear that China says America is a frog that's boiling, that doesn't realize they're boiling. You think about one of the things about China is the CCP, they believe that everything can be used as a weapon and should. And you've probably heard about the chips in our cranes that could be controlled by China. Now they're rectifying that and changing the chips. But you look at the fentanyl, it's being produced in China. They've got 17,000 Chinese fishing boats in the West Indies, and they go there and they hand it over to the cartels, and the cartels smuggle this fentanyl into our country, and more people die every year from fentanyl overdose than died in the Vietnam War. They're poisoning the American people.
I ran for public office in Georgia. I ran for attorney general, and I traveled the state. I met over 10,000 Georgians in 3 months. At virtually every campaign stop I made, someone would come up to me and tell me about having lost a son or daughter to fentanyl or a loved one. It is an epidemic, and it does trace directly back to China. But I want to know, and bear with me if you would, Congressman, do you think that there is a deep state that is partially or more so controlling the wheels in Washington?
Well, again, I've been there 120 days, and I can't be bought. I'll tell you that. And no one's tried to buy me.
Oh, that's going to be my
worked really
next
hard to
question.
get
If
my-
anybody had approached you or threatened you or cajoled you in any way.
No, and maybe because of my history, they might be afraid to. I don't know, but I'm here to represent the 5th Congressional District, and I just put it in God's hands. And if God wants me to be in Congress, I'm okay with that. And if God has another plan, I'm okay with that. But we've had a lot of success. We've been helping people all over the district, and I've been working with other Republicans. This big, beautiful bill that we just passed by one vote, believe it or not, it's not perfect, and there's things in there I don't like for sure, but it's way better than the alternative. But I wrote letters to the president and other people and said, hey, can you take this out of the bill and take that out of the bill? And they took some of those things out that I suggested. It's a team effort. Everyone worked on it, and it's going to go through the U.S. Senate. They'll probably make some changes. However, I've been told that we worked closer together step by step on this big, beautiful bill with the U.S. Senate than normal. So I'm sure there'll be changes, but probably less changes than they would historically make. And then it'll come back over to the House. But the idea is that we want to advance the America First agenda. And I think with this crazy national debt, $37 trillion, I think Trump's plan is that we've got to grow the economy and grow ourselves out of it by becoming energy dominant and America First, bringing manufacturing, supply chains, and all that back to our country.
Well,
is there a deep state? I don't know. I mean, I'm listening and learning and going to every committee, every meeting I can go to. I certainly think there's people that have power plays and want to control all the decision making. There's all kinds of cliques up there, but my clique is U.S. Constitution and America First.
Well, I share your value system, and that was I want to make sure you understand. I was not accusing you of anything. I'm just legitimately intellectually curious and concerned because I was home from school in the 4th grade. I'm older than you are. On November 22nd, 1963, I've studied the Kennedy assassination for the last 60 years. I have wanted to get to the truth, and I think that we finally have gotten to the truth, and I think it traces directly back to the CIA, Allen Dulles, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and J. Edgar Hoover. And I am concerned about the influence of the intelligence community in our federal government, which I happen to believe is rotten to its core. When you look at the amount of corruption that DOJ has uncovered and the idiotic things that we were spending our taxpayer dollars on, and then you couple that with Rand Paul's observation that they want to raise the federal debt limit another $4 or $5 trillion. And Ron Johnson says, forget it. I don't care about being in the United States Senate. Primary me, but I ain't voting for it. And good for him. It feels to me that we cannot contain this federal government, and it is worrisome. How are we going to do it?
Well, I got to tell you, if we were $1 trillion in debt, it would be egregious. And I think there's lots of deals. It seems like a lot of people have sold us out. I mean, how do you go to Congress as a bartender and within a couple of years you're worth multi-millions of dollars? And I haven't figured that one out. And I don't think
well, why is
Cash
Patel not investigating those people? I mean, I think that if you're making what do you get $225,000 a year as a congressman?
174,000.
174, and then you got to pay the living expenses and the commuting expenses and all the cost of being in Washington D.C., which is not a cheap place to live. It's not a good career move economically. So, to your point, how does someone get rich in being in Congress, like Nancy Pelosi, for instance, who I think is worth $125 million and is flagrantly guilty of insider trading. And I'm not in favor of banning congressmen from trading. I think that we ask enough of them already. I think you should be able to save and invest. I just don't think that a member of Congress should be able to do so with insider information. And we already have all the laws we need to enforce that. Where is the will to hold these people accountable? And why are they not being called on the carpet?
You know, it's interesting. I hear that all over my district, by the way. Nancy Pelosi, what is she, bat 1,000? Better than some of the best Wall Street investors?
Exactly.
She's got an incredible record. But one of the things I'm hearing all over my district, I'm very active. I put 245,000 miles on my truck, bought it at 0 miles. I've been to almost 400 churches, every tractor pull, every rodeo, and I just keep going every day.
Wow.
And I love it. And the more I meet people, the more I learn, and more I can learn about the problems that we can help solve. But what I'm constantly hearing is that DOJ has found all this waste, fraud, and abuse. We have the receipts. And just like you're saying, why isn't anyone being held accountable?
Well, where are the rescission bills? Why don't you introduce bills in Congress to rescind this spending and codify it?
Well, we are introducing bills to fix a lot of these problems. And but it's amazing. It's like there's a culture in D.C. that I'm starting to learn about. I've experienced it, where it's a culture of no or slow you down. Like something you should be able to do in a day. They want to, number one, say no. And if you don't take no for an answer, well, that's going to take 6 months and a lot of paperwork. That's why President Trump is such a freight train. He doesn't let these unelected bureaucrats slow him down. And I've used that to my advantage as well. I've done some things where they tried to slow me down, and I said respectfully, no, we're going to do this tomorrow. Well, it's going to take 2 weeks and a lot of paperwork. And I would say, well, I'll do the paperwork in 20 minutes, and we're going to do it tomorrow. And we ended up doing it the next day. So respectfully but firmly, not taking no for an answer. But we do need to hold people accountable. The legislation is one way to do it, but I think another better way is to get DOJ to prosecute these folks that have been robbing the American people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm sorry our time is limited. Congressman John McGuire from Virginia's 5th. He has been in Congress 120 days. I think our nation is in good shape with people like Congressman McGuire going to Washington to represent his district and all of us, really. Thank you so much for everything that you continue to do.
Well, thanks for having me, and have a great day. Thanks.
Roger Stone is joining us. Roger, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be with you.
I read your brilliant article. Before we get to it, let me play a clip here. It's from the Patrick Bet-David show, and he had on James O'Keefe. And I thought their dialogue is really worth listening to. Tyler, can you play those for us, please?
He terminated me. So I just started a new organization called OMG, O'Keefe Media Group, which I've been doing. And then they sued me to try to shut OMG down. So in this deposition footage, in the video tapes from federal court, depositions are public proceedings. I took the depositions, I put them in the movie, and you see what happened, and it's an insane story. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, well, so the events, the sequencing of the events, which is kind of weird, is when you got the big Pfizer, one of the directors that talks about what they were doing, Rob, if you want to go through the timeline. So the sequencing was kind of weird. When you first are, I want to see if I got the dates here or not. Let me see. Yeah, right there, January 2023. Yes. You know, we hear about the, under your leadership, release an undercover video featuring a man identified as Jordan Tristan Walker. This is the one that he's running out.
Yeah, this is the biggest story.
This is the biggest story, guys, at the peak.
The mRNA director of scientific research at Pfizer, talking about mutating the virus at Pfizer. This video was viewed an insane amount of times. I confront this guy, if you remember this. I confronted him with a microphone, and he physically assaulted me.
That's right, I remember that.
And he took the iPad out of my hand and he smashed it on the ground.
Yep.
This is the gay date, the gay guy at Pfizer. YouTube took it down. It's still on X, and he's talking about directed evolution at Pfizer, something that Pfizer denies, but he says it. He's a director at the company, and we released this video. And I confront him in a restaurant in New York City. And a week later, I was removed from Project Veritas. So conspiracy theories were abound. Did Pfizer bribe somebody? Did they put pressure on people? This is the guy, Jordan Walker.
I'm going to interrupt here because he's droning on. we've run running a little short on time, but he gets to the point that he feels like that or believes that his work on the Jeffrey Epstein files had a lot and maybe everything to do, along with the Pfizer thing, of him losing the company that he founded, which was Project Veritas. And he did extensive work on Epstein, and he feels like that some people in high places came back to bite him because of it. And, Roger, we just had clips from Kash Patel's appearance before the Senate Confirmation Committee, where he said he's going to release the Epstein files day one. And then he went to great length to talk about his abhorrent or his hatred for child trafficking and his disdain for anybody who would engage in that. And then we showed the clip of him on Maria Bartiromo with Dan Bongino, and they both, and it's so rehearsed, it is so obvious. And Bongino doesn't even look, his body language looks uncomfortable. And they're saying, yeah, Epstein killed himself. Well, you wrote a wonderful article that I read just this weekend, deep diving into that. Tell us what your impressions are and what you found.
You there, Roger? I think he's got his phone on mute, maybe.
Roger, if you can hear us.
Sorry about that. There we go.
Okay, there we
go. I find the whole thing very perplexing because I know Kash Patel extremely well. I have a very high regard for him as a person of integrity and honesty. I also have deep respect for his knowledge because, of course, he is the person who ran the Russian collusion hoax investigation for the House Intelligence Committee. It's very hard for me to determine how he could reach this conclusion. The conclusions of Michael Baden, the former New York medical examiner, who's probably the most respected pathologist in the country, who examined Epstein's body at the request of Epstein's brother and family, concluded that the marks on his body were not consistent with him hanging himself, that in fact the marks on his body were actually there a week prior because Epstein had an altercation with his cellmate, a killer, a former cop who was incarcerated for murder, named Tartaglione. But there's so many anomalies here. The guards just happened to be asleep. The video cameras just happened to not be working. His roommate, his cellmate, had been removed. And then lastly, he'd been taken off of suicide watch. Further, I interviewed David Schoen, the eminent criminal defense lawyer, who was retained for several $1 million, literally days before Epstein allegedly killed himself. They signed a contract. Epstein wired Schoen his retainer. They mapped out a defense strategy. By the way, everyone is allowed an attorney, even child sex traffickers. So why would you hire, a high-powered criminal defense lawyer to try to defend you if you were going to kill yourself 2 days later? Why would you wire him a couple $1 million? The answer is you wouldn't. So the whole thing is very perplexing, I must say.
Well, so Roger, you wrote one of the best books that I've read, and I've read a bunch of them. I was home on November 22nd, 1963, and I've relived that horror so many times in my life. And I thought we would never learn the answer to who killed Kennedy. You wrote a New York Times best-selling book called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. It traces straight back to Johnson and Allen Dulles, the then head of the CIA, leading me to my question is, do you believe that Epstein was working for the CIA or for the Israel intelligence department, and his job being to catch people in high places and compromising positions so they could own them? That is the rumor. That is the scuttlebutt, if you will.
I think it is more than rumor. It is interesting that if you read my book, the Clintons' War on Women, probably the book that got me indicted on trumped-up charges, because there was no Russian collusion for me to lie about.
No, there was not.
It's impossible to lie under oath to Congress about things that never actually happened. But let's put that aside for a moment. There's very little question that I interviewed. The longest chapter in that book is about Jeffrey Epstein. It's chapter 9. It's called Orgy Island. I'm the second American author to write extensively about Epstein. I give full credit to Nick Bryant, the investigative reporter, who really wrote and broke the Epstein story initially in Gawker. Interesting that Bryant, who obtained the Little Black Book of Epstein, who obtained the FAA flight records to see who had been on the Lolita Express, his exclusive jet. Brian, who interviewed a number of Epstein's victims, including Virginia Giuffre, who only days ago, they tell us, committed suicide. I doubt that strongly. I interviewed her extensively. I read every word of her testimony in her lawsuit against Epstein. I gravely doubt that she killed herself. But I know that the police chief in Palm Beach, Florida, conducted an undercover investigation of Epstein, handed the state's attorney an open and shut case for child sex trafficking of 33 underage children, as well as statutory rape. And after Epstein hired Alan Dershowitz and Gerald Lefcourt and Leon Black, three of the best-known criminal defense attorneys in the country, the state prosecutors charged him with one count of solicitation. John, that's like you and I walking into a bar and soliciting a hooker. It's a minor charge, to say the least, a slap on the wrist. And the police chief was very upset about this. He figured that the state prosecutor had either been threatened or he had been bribed, one or the other. By the way, state prosecutor resigns shortly after the Epstein case and then is immediately hired by a number of Epstein's associates to run their criminal defense. So we have the answer to that. The police chief goes to the U.S. attorney for South Florida, and he complains. He points out that he had handed over a comprehensive case for child sex trafficking and statutory rape and other crimes, and that the state prosecutor, had given Epstein a walk. Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney, conducts his own investigation, and then after 6 months, rubber stamps the state charge and puts a seal on the entire matter, so none of us would ever know anything. The Palm Beach Post newspaper goes to federal court to get that information unsealed, and after a 2.5-year legal fight, they're successful. Later, Acosta, the same Alex Acosta, who was a U.S. attorney, was appointed Secretary of Labor by President Donald Trump. Now, interestingly,
I know where you're going.
No one ever told Trump that Acosta had been the prosecutor who gave Epstein, who worked with him in preparation. When they said to Acosta, "What are you going to say if they ask you why you gave Epstein a pass?" He said, and I quote, "I'm going to tell them the truth, that the head of the CIA contacted me and told me that he worked for them, and that I was to rubber stamp the state charges and seal the case. There you
Bingo.
have it.
So my question is, Roger, I am a devotee of Donald J. Trump. I believe in him so much. It has been my excited belief that he would be able to cure and tame the deep state. Now you see the head of the FBI, the assistant head of the FBI, and the Attorney General of the United States showing less than enthusiasm for releasing all of the tapes. I mean, one of the things that James O'Keefe said on one of the clips that I wanted to play, and we're kind of running short of time, is that Pam Bondi said in a public place to an undercover reporter for OMG Media, that's O'Keefe's new media company, that it was taking so long because they had tens of thousands of videos of showing people having sex with underage minors. And then she repeated it to the national media. Yet we're not getting the evidence. And it's feeling like more of the same.
Well, first of all, I think the jury's still out. I'm not prepared to reach a conclusion yet, other than to say that I'm concerned. But first of all, we know that when they raided Epstein's his home in New York City, which, by the way, is the largest, most expensive single-family home in Manhattan, his island, his apartment in Paris, and his ranch in New Mexico, they removed from the safes, the FBI removed a substantial number of DVDs and hard drives. So my question is, where are they? Now, they would be very graphic. They'd be pornographic. They would also expose the identity of the victims. So I don't expect them to release them, but they can release a list of the names of those who were being entertained by Epstein. We know some of these names already. Disproportionate number of Democrats. Isn't that interesting? Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, and George Mitchell, the former majority leader of the U.S. Senate, among Jeffrey Epstein's pals. This is all in my book, by the way, the Clintons' War on Women. So I'm still hopeful that we will get to this information. I'm not quite sure how they'll do it because they cannot release the actual tapes. As for the list, per se, there is no list, in my opinion. If you look at Epstein's phone book, which is cited in my book, it's also reported by Nick Bryan at Gawker, not everyone in his list is guilty of a sex crime. It's his entire phone list. I suspect many of the people listed in there are, but many of the people in there are not. I'm still hopeful that we will get to the bottom of this, although, frankly, I'm more concerned with more current problems. I'm sorry, but I don't believe Thomas Matthew Crooks, acting alone, shot at Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Why the rush to cremate his body? Why did we hose down the roof from which he shot almost immediately? It's just like they hosed out the back of the limousine that John F. Kennedy was killed. They cleaned it out with a hose within an hour.
Are you reading my notes, Roger? That was the next thing I was going to ask you about. The similarities.
We didn't even have to. Go ahead.
Well, just the similarities to Butler and Dealey Plaza are unmistakable. The reduced Secret Service detail, as you said, the destruction of evidence. And are you familiar with Maxwell Urich?
I think I may have been the first person to raise his name, and that's because almost immediately after the shooting, a source of mine who's in in Pennsylvania law enforcement called me on the phone and said that he believed that the shooter was not Thomas Matthew Crooks, but Matthew Urich, a man who had been arrested previously at an altercation at a Trump event in Pennsylvania. So I speculated about. I didn't say flatly that Urich was the shooter. I said a law enforcement source has contacted me, arguing that Matthew Urich was the actual shooter. It's not an assertion; it's a report of something that happened.
Well, I'm going to send you a YouTube video on Maxwell Urich that I've watched several times. Maxwell Urich had gauges, and he took them out, and the gauges left a scar on his ear. If you zoom in on the shooter on the AGR building, the shooter had a scar on his ear. Thomas Maxwell Crooks had no gauges, had no pierced ears, had no scars. And so I think that you're onto something about Maxwell Urich. He also drove a white van to Butler from Mesa, Arizona, which is titled to Urich Munitions. That's his father's company. Urich Munitions provided arms to third world countries, we are told. And Maxwell Urich's parents filed a missing persons report on him on July the 14th and the day after Butler. And he, to my knowledge, has not been seen or heard of yet since. He also fought in the Ukraine and was believed to have had ties with Ralph, the West Palm Beach would-be assassin. It stinks to high heavens. And, you know, Roger, I have no interest, frankly, in the names in Epstein's book. I'm not interested in the videos. What I am interested in is an admission, if it's true, and I happen to, my instinct tells me it is, that he was working for the CIA. I want an admission that the CIA killed Kennedy. I want an admission, if it is true, that there is linkage between the CIA and these assassins. And I am sick to my stomach of the intelligence community committing crimes against our nation's laws and against the laws of God. And I don't know how they rationalize it, but I think it is a problem and that they've got a stranglehold on our country. And if my suspicions are correct, we will never regain the moral authority to lead this world. And God knows there needs to be someone that has the authority to lead and represent truth and virtue. We've lost it.
I agree with that. I think among President Trump's very best appointments is that of Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Information. As you may have noticed, she is rooting out quislings, spies, traitors, fellow travelers. This week we fired 100 people from the national security apparatus. She's referred several dozen others to the Justice Department for prosecution for illegal leaking. We've seen no scandals connected to her, as we've seen missteps by others in the administration. I'm really, many ways, looking to her, I think very highly of her, to help root out the corruption in our intelligence agencies. There's no question, if you read my book on the Kennedy assassination, the man who killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ, or if you follow these hearings, which Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has done a superb job on, that the Central Intelligence Agency is one of those complicit in Kennedy's murder. So is organized crime. Now, here's an interesting point, John. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, formed in the late 70s, did an exhaustive investigation and came up with the conclusion, despite the fact that the CIA completely stonewalled their investigation, provided no witnesses, provided no documents, wouldn't even speak to them, they concluded that organized crime was deeply involved in Kennedy's assassination. Okay, why have none of the documents released by the National Archives, that's over 80,000 documents, not a single one of them regards organized crime or specifically the role of Carlos Marcello, who we know the Assassination Records Review Board set up in the late 90s to look at the Kennedy assassination, listened to audio recordings of Bugs placed in his jail cell in which he bragged before and after the fact about his involvement in Kennedy's murder. Why hasn't that material been turned over by the National Archive? There's so much material missing, trying to, I would think, thwart the president's order, that it's ridiculous.
Roger, it is such an honor to have you on the show. I admire what you've done so much. You're not in a position to give me any political favors. My point is, I say that sincerely. And I don't know of anyone other than perhaps Rudy Giuliani who was more mistreated through the honest, hard work for our country than the two of you were. And I hope you're doing okay. And I appreciate your continuing to fight for the truth and fight for our country.
I appreciate that. Folks can follow me at stonezone.com. Stonezone.com. It's free. Check it out.